On this episode of the Actual VR Show, we're talking about a revealing interview that John Carmack, the CTO of Oculus, the creator of Wolfenstein, the creator of Doom and Quake, and what he has to say about Oculus. Do you guys remember rocket jumps? For our second story of the day, we've got Borderlands VR, that crazy game with the... Ah! I mean, do you know that game? Okay, well, they're coming out with a version for virtual reality. Finally, we talk about how the movie industry is reacting to what Unreal Engine is bringing to the table in regards to things. We're talking about Hollywood. Hollywood is for... And finally, Hollywood's taking my advice and incorporating game developers on set for all those motion pictures they're putting out in the valley. Are you ready to go? I don't know if I am, but we're gonna do it. Let's go! What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Actual VR Show, the show where we take everything that's happening in immersive content news and we boil it down. We pack it in this little tight nugget of goodness that we call the Actual VR Show. Cracking open a cold one. For our first story of the day, we're going to be talking about the Joe Rogan podcast. And he had an interview with John Carmack. If you don't know who John Carmack is, he's kind of he helped create titles, PC games like Quake and Wolfenstein and Doom, if you're familiar with any of those. But more importantly, more recently, he's been actively involved. He's the CTO for Oculus. So he's the chief technology officer responsible for things like the Quest and the Rift S. And John talked a little bit about the first time he played Minecraft VR. He had a dream about being in Minecraft. And when he looks back at those memories, he remembers them as if he were there. It was an actual place and time. That's totally different than your traditional gaming experience, or your traditional media consumption when you're watching a TV. Because with those memories, you remember a certain part of a movie, but you remember where you watched it maybe. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you don't remember where you saw it, but you do remember that scene. With virtual reality, you remember it like you were actually there. Your brain has accepted the fact that you were there at a certain place in a certain time in virtual reality. That's the reason why we talk about training people in virtual reality or educating people in virtual reality. The retention rate is so much higher than traditional media. They talk a little bit about augmented reality, they touch on the Magic Leap, they talk about the Neuralink, they talk about AI. If you're into that kind of stuff, definitely check out the Joe Rogan Experience podcast with John Carmack. If you didn't have a chance to check out the whole 3-hour podcast with Joe and John because you were watching the Actual VR podcast where we take everything, we boil it down to what really matters to you guys, then check out the Actual VR podcast coming out every Friday.
You've got a rope string hair.
Yep, it's this one here, right?
Yeah.
I need to just cut it.
There's
scissors up there too.
You want to do that? It's perfect.
For our second story of the day, we're going to be talking about Borderlands 2 VR. It came out for PSVR last year, but what we've found out is this recent release trailer is that it's coming out this fall for PC VR. So Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, if you've got a Valve Index. So PC VR platforms, we're going to be able to play Borderlands 2. It's a super cool game. If you look at the trailer, some of the graphics look great.
Who's ready for a mother humping tea party? Freestyle!
I mean, when we talk about the level of detail and some of the character animation, I feel like they had an advantage when porting this into virtual reality. The cell shading style is inherently low res, low poly, but it looks absolutely amazing. I highly recommend you check it out this fall when it comes out for those platforms. And for our final story of the day, we're going to talk about Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine, if you didn't know, it's a game engine. A lot of games are developed in Unreal, kind of like Unity, if you know what Unity is. They're two different platforms. And if you talk to most developers in the virtual reality space, they use Unity. And when I started deciding how am I going to get involved, how can I utilize VR development for what I do in 360 video, in video production. And Unreal seemed to be the best application for that. Everybody went Unity. It's in my nature. I decided, like, everybody's gonna go this way, I'm gonna go that way. And I saw virtual production and this service that they offer, this product that they have, essentially that allows you to film with a 3D background, a game engine background, and make changes on set. So to summarize that, why is that important? Like, how does this matter to you? Well, if you're in film, this changes the game. It almost eliminates the need for post-production. You're able to see this 3D modeled set with screens. You know, take a look at this video real quick. I'm just gonna show you a little glimpse of what this looks like, because it's hard to explain until you see it.
Great, let's cut and reset.
No matter what the project is, the creatives always want to see the closest representation to the final product as early on in the creative process.
We can track a camera's position in space in real time and render its perspective so that we can compellingly convince a camera that something else is happening in front of it that really isn't there.
So this is something that I'm very excited about. You know, I have no desire to build full-on games in virtual reality, but what I do have an interest in is how that affects, how Unreal and how virtual reality affects the way we film, and how I can create these 360 video experiences and incorporate them into the Unreal Engine for interactivity. We are absolutely on the verge of completely revolutionizing the way we film movies. I mean, when we talk about the incorporation of a game engine into traditional film, the possibilities are endless. We're talking, people on set are putting on virtual reality headsets in live. Instead of waiting months to have the set changed, they're making these changes in a matter of minutes in a VR headset. That's crazy innovation. If you go to Unreal's website, Unreal Engine's website, they have this virtual production guide. It's an insanely in-depth guide. It's like 90-something pages. You go in there, you download it for free. I highly recommend you do some research, and maybe we can learn together. My producer, Nick, he would say not to go this heavy, this emotional, but I do want to take a moment. I tell you guys at the end of every episode that I appreciate all the love that you guys send towards the show. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the team here. It's hard, and what I don't talk a lot about is I do own the business. I do own Actuality VR. And part of running a business is there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. There's a lot of, you know, personal stuff. There's a lot of stresses that come with owning your own business. And this past weekend I had a pretty low moment in that. But it was people like you and people like Jason Hedge, who's a good friend of mine who is a fan of the show, and the members of the team here that really brought it and showed me that we are building something great. And we are doing something that is helping other people. It's about something greater. We want to change the world, and we want to change it for the better. So I want to just take this moment, this real turn of emotion, to go from this super high energy just to say exactly how thankful I am for you guys coming in here, sharing the show, liking the show, commenting on it. It truly does mean a lot, and I'm so grateful. If you're new to the show and you like what we're doing, you can always show us that you like what we're doing by giving us a thumbs up, sharing the video, subscribing if you're on YouTube, and following the page if you're on Facebook. As always, we come out with a new show every Monday. We also have the Actual VR podcast coming out every Friday, where we talk to industry professionals. We find out how they're using immersive tech in their respective fields, and we also take a moment to break down these stories and dive just a little bit deeper into these stories. So, wrapping it up, gotta find a way to bring it on back. See you next week on this show, this one here. You're here, we're here. I'll see you again. Just come hang out sometime. Next week specifically on the show. You just come by. If it's news to you, you've been watching our show long enough. See you next week.
I'm gonna have to bring up the lighting.